On this Monday night, dangerously hot weather settling in over millions of Canadians.
This is heat that is above body temperature.
The dangers of a heat dome and how high temperatures could soar. Mounting consequences of Calgary's water crisis.
It could absolutely put us out of business.
The worries with the Stampede just weeks away. Social media is linked to a mental health crisis among youth.
Many of them are experiencing harm. That has to change.
What America's top doctor is calling for to warn people about the dangers. And counting down to the Paris Olympics, the rehearsals, the security, and the backup plans.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. To breaking news out of Toronto first. Police say 3 adults are dead after a shooting in the city's Don Mills neighborhood. Officers were called to the scene late this afternoon. Investigators say the shooting took place inside the lobby of an office space. A daycare that shares the same building as that office was evacuated, and a nearby elementary school is placed in lockdown. Parents and caregivers were waiting behind police tape as those buildings were cleared. Sources tell Global News police are treating the attack as a possible murder-suicide. The temperature is rising across a huge swath of the U.S. tonight, and parts of central Canada are going to be caught in it too. Intense heat that could match or break hundreds of records is hitting about 70 million Americans. Heat warnings, advisories, and watches are in place across the U.S. Midwest and northeastern U.S., including New York City, where 500 cooling centers are opening.
Be very aware of signs of heat-related illness on the body. Heat stroke occurs when the body's temperature rises quickly and can rapidly lead to death.
By midweek, Toronto is expected to feel like 45 degrees Celsius with the humidity. As Eric Sorensen explains, this isn't just a heat wave, it's a massive heat dome that's expected to linger for days.
Hour by hour, the heat is settling in over much of eastern Canada and will become more oppressive as the sunniest days of the year approach. In Toronto, where urban infrastructure only makes it worse, the district school board is telling parents to dress their kids in light clothing and have them drink lots of water. Natalia Blazevic bikes most days and knows from experience she has to cut back.
The heat can get to you. I've already fallen before.
Phil Monahan is a runner.
I'm going to take a break from running for a week. I feel like every year it's getting sort of where the summer is expanding further and further into May on the one end and October on the other end.
And in between, the heat grows more intense in this era of climate change. This is more than a heat wave where the jet stream can move warm air into a region and out again. A heat dome starts with a ridge of high pressure in the atmosphere that lingers. The pressure causes the air to sink, the compression creating more heat, and that prevents the updraft that can produce clouds and rain that brings more relief, and instead you get unrelenting sun and heat. British Columbia experienced a devastating heat dome 3 summers ago, the hottest temperatures in Canadian history and the deadliest extreme weather event, more than 600 heat-related deaths.
This is incredibly serious, and this is something that's really important to pay attention to, because heat domes really highlight that this is heat that is above body temperature. That makes it very difficult for your body to cool.
Dr. DeRamsey says the homeless who cannot escape the heat are at great risk, along with children and the elderly.
We know that they are disproportionately affected by heat and are so vulnerable to these changes in our environment.
Many do understand this is 1 week to be out of the sun and the heat.
From 12 to 5, we are always at home. We are air conditioning we drink more water, we stay hydrated.
I don't like to go out when there's the atmosphere is kind of hot, so it makes me feel uncomfortable.
Natalia headed home early on Monday. Doctors say the ability to keep cool can be overwhelmed with the temperatures and humidex levels that are expected this week. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
In California, it is dry, hot, and windy, and there are red flag warnings about wildfires. North of Los Angeles, a fire that scorched more than 6,000 hectares is still out of control. It is the largest wildfire in California this year. More than 1,200 people were forced out of a valley popular with campers and hikers, and 19,000 other residents of northwestern Los Angeles have been put on evacuation notice, warned they'll have to leave if that fire pushes further south. In the Northwest Territories, the wildfire emergency in Fort Good Hope is not over. A prolonged drought in the territory, made worse by climate change, means almost the entire area is facing elevated fire danger. Neetu Garcha reports on a huge fire that's threatening a tiny northern community where the only route to safety is by boat or plane.
As an evacuation center in Norman Wells Northwest Territories offers support to hundreds of people, a human-caused wildfire is on the doorstep of their community.
We have to take it one day at a time. Brings us comfort knowing our houses are still standing and the power was not turned off.
Officials say the fire has grown significantly and just over 100 of Fort Good Hope's 500 residents have stayed back to help in the firefight.
The weather is in our favor a little bit. It's going to push the fire away from the community, so that's good news. But we're going to have a little bit of dry, hot weather coming, so it probably will increase the fire behavior somewhat.
Flames broke out on Saturday, less than 5 kilometers from the remote community, only accessible by boat or plane.
It started getting bigger, and then there was black smoke. Grabbed whatever they could and then just left. Some left without toothbrushes and, little small stuff like that.
Everybody was kind of like caught off guard, but also really panicky. We're really glad that our community was able to pull together and make the evacuation successful.
It's believed the fire started after a campfire was abandoned, prompting renewed warnings to the public to be responsible.
The underlying environmental conditions, including the severe drought that we experienced in 2023, have not changed, and there is still significant risk of wildfire starting and spreading in the NWT.
More fire crews are headed to the region, and with no rain expected for a few days, officials say it's too early to say when residents will be able to return home. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
The show will go on at the Calgary Stampede this summer despite a local state of emergency over the city's water supply. What's described as a catastrophic water main break could take up to 5 weeks to repair. Calgarians have been told to limit their water use just as summer is ramping up. Heather Yourex-West looks at what that means for the city.
Ground zero of Calgary's water emergency and work to repair a critical feeder main break continues.
The first feeder main break has now been fully repaired, and we are now able to focus on the 5 hotspots.
Contractors from 6 private companies have joined city crews working around the clock. But a week and a half under water restrictions, officials warn there could be another 5 weeks to go.
It's terrifying, as a small business that relies on water and a small business that has just come out of 3 years of unprecedented times that really put us on the ropes. It could absolutely put us out of business.
It's at a time of year when the beer business should be booming. The start of Calgary's iconic Stampede just 16 days away.
The show will go on, but it will go on in a very responsible manner.
The Stampede says it will bring its own supply of treated water to help support the 10-day festival. Until the line is repaired, the city says it will not be able to meet typical levels of demand. It's why residents have been asked to continue cutting consumption by at least 25%. Officials asking the hundreds of thousands of tourists expected to visit the city to curb their water use as well.
Currently, as in the past, I think you need to make it very clear to everybody that this is not business as usual. It's always a bit of a tightrope walk when you're dealing with trying to bring people in, but also trying to minimize the usage of resources.
This isn't the first time Calgary has coped with a crisis weeks before the Stampede. In 2013, when floods struck, the Stampede adopted the slogan, "Hell or high water," as it soldiered on. Online memes now turning that to hell or no water for 2024. Donna?
Okay, Heather Yourex-West in Calgary. Thank you. Canada's defense minister is standing by a decision to send a naval vessel to Cuba, where it docked alongside some of Russia's fleet last week. Bill Blair says he authorized the ship to sail into Havana's harbor on the advice of Navy commanders.
The Canadian ship visited Havana to demonstrate Canada's presence, naval capability, and commitment to safe and open waters in the Americas.
HMCS Margaret Brooke is the first Canadian warship to visit Cuba since 2018. Cuba remains a close ally of Russia, and Cubans have been fighting alongside Russian forces in Ukraine. There's still lots of confusion about a secret report on foreign interference in Canada's Parliament. An intelligence watchdog said some MPs wittingly assisted the efforts of foreign states to meddle in Canadian politics, but no names have been released. Last week, Green Party leader Elizabeth May and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh had very different takes on the full report, which they've been able to read. Singh says some MPs are, in his words, traitors. May is not so worried, though today she did have more to say. Mackenzie Gray is with me. Mackenzie.
Yeah, Donna, one of the few people who's seen the stunning unredacted foreign interference report, Green Party leader Elizabeth May attempted to clarify her previous comments.
I was up here and I read the report. I'm really relieved.
That feeling stemming from May's assertion that no current MP accused in the all-party report were, in her words, traitors. Despite that, there are still some serious allegations.
A few of our colleagues currently serving are potentially compromised by foreign interference.
Those examples include foreign governments interfering to help in nomination contests, according to May, something she believes is not criminal, opting for other adjectives.
Dumb, unethical, foolish. You can use a number of terms for allowing someone to show up and help you win your nomination. If you weren't asking questions, you should have ought to have thought, do I want to accept help from somebody?
Speaking with reporters for the second time on the report, May trying to clear up differences between her reading and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh's interpretation.
And I don't want to, for any reason at all, create impressions for Canadians that Mr. Singh and I disagree on the contents.
But the differences are stark. Singh saying he was more concerned after reading the unredacted report, believing parliamentarians who allegedly wittingly collaborated with foreign governments are traitors to the country.
There is a certain amount of responsibility that party leaders have.
A contrast the Prime Minister used to justify why he doesn't agree with some of the committee's findings.
Some of the conclusions, as was highlighted by Minister LeBlanc, are not conclusions that we draw based on the actual evidence and intelligence.
Mac, it's hard to know how seriously to take all this. Is the intelligence overblown or unreliable, or are there really traitors in Parliament? Are there likely to be any clear answers?
Well, the allegations are extremely serious, Donna, and even the Prime Minister, who refuses to give any examples of what he thinks is wrong with the report, has said as much. But as for getting to the bottom of them, in particular naming any of the names of the MPs or senators alleged to be wittingly involved in foreign interference, that seems unlikely as of now. The Public Safety Minister has said it would be reckless to do so, and it could be criminal for opposition MPs who have that knowledge to share anything. So that's led the House of Commons to boot the issue over to the public inquiry into foreign interference, which said earlier today it has all the same documents NSICOP had. So the question will be, Donna, if Justice Marie Hogue will go further and provide more details on these parliamentarians.
Okay, lots to watch for. Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thank you. A man accused of plotting with the Indian government to assassinate a Sikh leader with dual American-Canadian citizenship appeared in a New York federal court today. Nikhil Gupta pleaded not guilty to charges related to a foiled murder-for-hire plot against Sikh separatist Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon. Gupta is being kept in custody. He was arrested in Prague last June after U.S. prosecutors say an Indian government official recruited him to kill Pannoon on American soil. The case is linked to the killing of BC Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar last year. Canadian authorities accuse the Indian government of being linked to that murder. India denies it. Israel's war cabinet dissolved. Coming up, what's behind Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's decision? In Israel, what happens next in the war in Gaza will no longer be decided by the war cabinet. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dissolved it. Crystal Gamansing explains why he did it and what it could mean for the conflict.
Created to signal political unity in the days following the unprecedented October 7th attacks, the wheels have come off of Israel's war cabinet. An expected ending, says this former Middle East policy analyst for the U.S. State Department.
Netanyahu has lost his sort of domestic centrist political cover, and that gave him international legitimacy, which is all important today, more than ever, for Israel.
After the departure of two key members, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu proactively dissolved the war cabinet to block far-right government coalition members from stepping in. but he remains exposed to pressure from them and Benny Gantz, who earlier this month called his own resignation regrettable, but fateful strategic decisions, he said, are met with hesitation and procrastination because of political considerations. He called on Israel's prime minister to set an election date. A large majority of the Israeli population is deeply unhappy with the direction of the government when it comes to getting the hostages back home.
He sort of made himself Mr. Security, and he has lost it after October 7th.
Ehu Yahari is an author and expert on Israeli-Arab relations and says despite massive weekly protests and what he calls a collective depression over the hostages, Netanyahu's political career is not over yet.
Those Israelis, and many of them, who would like to see, to bid Netanyahu farewell, they are not enamored with the candidates to replace him.
Yahari anticipates things will start turning around in the coming weeks when he says Israel's war on Hamas and Gaza will likely move to a third stage, with Israel Defense Forces focusing on counterinsurgency attacks instead of sweeping ground operations. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Still ahead, the U.S. Surgeon General says the harms of social media are being overlooked, and it's time to change that. It's something all parents worry about, and now the U.S. Surgeon General has come out with a blunt message about the harms of social media. He wants tobacco-style warnings on social media sites because they have caused a mental health crisis among young people. In an op-ed in the New York Times today, he writes these harms are not a failure of willpower in parenting. They are the consequence of unleashing powerful technology without adequate safety measures, transparency, or accountability. Jackson Prosco explains the evidence and what needs to change.
As the effects of all that swiping and scrolling come into focus, public health officials are increasingly worried about the impact of social media on the developing brains of children and teens.
The platforms are often designed to maximize how much time our kids are spending on them.
The U.S. Surgeon General now believes platforms like TikTok, Snapchat, and Instagram are so addictive and potentially harmful, they should carry a warning similar to cigarettes, stating social media is associated with significant mental health harms for adolescents.
A warning label would help parents to understand these risks. Many parents don't know that those risks exist.
There is, in fact, good reason to worry.
We've seen a sharp decrease in terms of children's mental health over the last 15 years, which is coinciding with screen use.
Canadian researcher Emma Duerden has used brain imaging studies to map out the impact of social media use on teens.
We're also seeing strong associations in terms of their mental health, in terms of anxiety and depression, and even higher rates of aggression in teens.
Causing harms, the addictive features.
States like Florida have passed laws banning social media for children under 14, requiring parental permission for older teens. Late last year, 33 states sued Meta, parent company of Facebook and Instagram, accusing them of targeting kids.
We know that the company was well aware of the negative effect.
While time and again, the industry has insisted it's doing enough.
We've built more than 30 different tools, resources, and features that parents can set time limits for their teens using our apps.
Warning labels are seen as a direct and potentially more effective appeal to parents. It would take an act of Congress to make them mandatory. Decades ago, warning labels worked to dramatically cut cigarette use. In the digital era, no one knows if they would help curb an addiction that may be just as harmful. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
Preparing for the Paris Games. Next, the unique challenges of an unprecedented opening ceremony. The Olympic Games in Paris are fast approaching. Hosting them in a city as old and as famous as Paris poses some unique challenges, and organizers are planning to make the most of the location, including for the opening ceremony. Redmond Shannon looks at the complex plans.
When we think of Olympic openings, we think of the Big O in '76 or Athens in '04, all of them inside a stadium. But in Paris, the plan is to let the Games begin with a show like no other, along the River Seine. 94 boats are in place to take more than 10,000 athletes on a 6-kilometre boat ride, passing some of the city's most iconic landmarks along the way, finishing opposite the Eiffel Tower. More advanced rehearsals took place on Monday, numbered flags in place of national banners, for a spectacle to be watched by 300,000 spectators and 100 world leaders, protected by 45,000 police.
We have a security system which is very robust in terms of protecting spectators on the riverbanks and on the entire perimeter.
President Emmanuel Macron says there is a Plan B or Plan C if needed. B would reportedly confine events to the Eiffel Tower area. C would be at the Stade de France Olympic Stadium. It was one of the targets of the simultaneous Paris terror attacks in 2015.
But you have more controls over a restricted area because you have the benefit of a structure to protect the patrons, as opposed to the river, which is more of an open-ended space.
The Seine will also host triathlon swimming events once its waters have been cleaned up and once they have calmed down. Macron and the mayor of Paris have both promised to swim in the river before the games to prove it's clean. The mayor's dip has already been postponed due to the strong spring currents and the national elections. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Crazy stuff. That is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Kitty Bitty Lake in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. Beautiful spot. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.